Hello there and welcome to this series of videos on pseudocoding. So pseudocode is a recognized convention that we use in order to write algorithms, and you need to be able to know this because it's more than likely that one of these will pop up in your exam. So in this question here we have a scenario, and usually it's quite a comprehensive question that you have to break down in order to understand it, and that's what we're going to do in our first step. So let's jump straight in then. The sales director of a company wishes to compare the sales in thousands of pounds achieved by her sales staff in the previous month. So we're talking thousands of pounds. Now we've got to think what data type that might be. Design an algorithm using pseudocode with the following inputs. So there's going to be two inputs in total, and the first one is the number of sales staff. So I might put num staff here, num underscore staff, something like that, and the sales figure for each member of staff. So how am I going to input the sales figure for each member of staff? We'll have a look at that later on, but I've got two inputs anyway. The algorithm should output four different things. The first thing is the mean of the sales figures. So in order to calculate the mean, I need the total divided by how many I've got. And that will be, looking at it, that'll be how many staff I have, which is number or num staff. So I'll have the total divided by num staff, and that will work out the mean for me. The values of the sales figures which are below the mean. So I'm going to have to work out the mean first before I can do that second bullet point. The third one, how many sales figures are below the mean? Again, I'm going to have to work out the mean first before I can actually do that. And then the lowest sales figure in total. So I might call that min, okay, for the smallest value. And we've been given some test data here just to show an example of what kind of data could be entered. So for example, the user might enter 6, and that is the number of staff. And then we've got 6 entries from them staff, such as 45, 55, 65, 65, 10 and 60. So that's staff member 1, staff member 2, staff member 3, 4, 5 and 6. Then the outputs should be similar to the mean. So we output the mean, the values below the mean, which are 45 and 10, because 45 is less than 50 and 10 is less than 50. And then the total number of values below the mean, we have 45 and 10 are below the mean, and that's in total 2 values. And then finally, we've got the lowest value, which is 10. And that's because that is the lowest value out of the set that we've been provided. So let's get on then and start writing the pseudocode for this algorithm. And the first thing I like to do is, once I've been through the question and properly planned it, I need to start writing my variables. So the first thing I'll write is num staff. So how many staff have I got? And that's 6 in this example, but it could be any number, but they're always whole numbers, because how can you have 0.5 of a person? Well, you can't. So the next bit is the sales figure for each member of staff. Now this might trip you up a little bit, because you're going to think here, the sales figure for each member of staff. So if I've got 6 sales figures, I need to add them in. Then I've got to work out the mean by adding them all up into some kind of total. And then I have to use the mean that I've just worked out to work out which values are then below the mean. So I'm going to have to store these variables, these inputs, should I say, somewhere so that I can reference them, recall them later on. And in order to do that, what I would probably recommend is something like an array. And I'll start, my arrays start at 0, don't they? So just get rid of my shapes, there we go. And this is what my array would look like. So they start at 0, and if we entered 6, we'd end up with this situation. And we might have 6 in there. So I put ... because although we've been provided with the output 6 or the input 6 there, it could be any number. You know, we could hire a new member of staff and that could change. So I need to make an array. In order to do that in pseudocode, I'm just going to call this my array. So here, my array, bracket, bracket. And I would say my array. And if you put in there 6, that would actually create this situation. However, we don't know yet how many our array actually needs. So we're going to hold off making the array for just a second because we need to think about the ordering of this algorithm. So I'll show you how to create an array in just a second, and you'll see why I'm going to save doing this till a little bit later on. So then I've got the mean. So I've got a total here. So adding up all the totals. Total. That's going to be of type float. Could also be a real. So if you see those or you use those interchangeably, no problem there. Just pick one and stick to it and be consistent, I suppose. So that's the total. We have something for the mean as well. So the mean is a float because it can be divided. Float or real. And then I've got values which are below the mean. So we don't have anything. I'll just output this directly, I suppose. How many sales figures are below the mean? So I might have something called below mean. And that's going to be of type integer because we're being asked how many values are below the mean. And in this example here, we're provided with the output of 2. And then we've got the lowest sales figure. So that is going to be min. And the lowest sales figure, if the input is a float, then this minimum value will be a float in the end. Okay? So don't worry if I've forgotten any. I might add them in later on. I can always add them to the side over here. But normally I always forget some variables and I leave some space at the top in order to add it in as we go. So here, the situation we had before with declaring the array, the reason why I didn't do it further up is because I would like to do this first. So see if you can understand why I'm doing this. So here we go. So the first thing I've done there is I've said set the variable numStaff to equals the input to be assigned the input, and then we've given the user a question to enter the number of staff. So they'll enter 6 in this scenario because that's what's been provided over here. They'll enter 6 in there, and then what I'll do, once I've got the number of staff, I will then say my array numStaff, close the bracket, is float. So can you see why I've done this after I have taken in the number of staff variable? I have managed to create an array called my array of what size? Of whatever size the user enters. And then I've put is float in there. Okay? Now if the person enters 6, it's going to be between 0 and 6. Now if I want to keep it 0 to 6, then I can, but don't forget that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So normally what I do is I put a little -1 in here. Okay, it's very important that I do that. If you don't do that, then you just need to make sure that you always start your array from the position of 1 and not 0. So that will mean that one will be crossed out there. Okay? So bear that in mind as we go through. So I'm going to add that -1 in. So I'm going to start from 0. Put -1 there. I'm going to start from 0 to 5, which means this one won't exist. So this is what my array would look like. And once I've done that now, I need the user to enter in all the sales figures repeatedly into that array. So put 45 in that position, 55 in there, 65 in there, 65 in there, 10 and 60. And to do that, I'm going to use a loop. Okay? And I'm going to say for I equals 0. So I is a local variable. Call it whatever you like. I've just called mine I. And we're going to loop to the number of sales staff, num staff. Don't forget that's 6, isn't it, in this example? So I'm going to have to minus 1 because I want to go from 0 to 5. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my array at the position of I is given the value of an input from the user. Now let's have a look at this line a little bit more closely. It says my array at the position of I. So in the first pass, I is 0. So it's going to go to my array at the position of 0. And it's going to be assigned input enter value of I, which is 0, plus 1, which makes it 1. So enter value 1. So that means the user will enter 45 and it will be stored in my array here. Then this I will increment a little bit later on. So here, next I, increments I, so adds 1 to it, that means, and it goes to position 1. And it asks the user the same question. It says enter the value now for position 1. So they come along and then they put in there 55. And this will continue and populate the entire array with all the values inside it. And that's the benefit of using iteration or repetition. Doing the same thing over and over again. So that'll get you some marks in the exam because you're able to populate an array. Now once it's been populated, I need to keep a running total. So I'm going to say the total variable is given the total amount again plus the thing that I've just put in my array. And there it is. So the total is assigned the total amount again, that's whatever's stored in there, plus the thing I've just added in my array, this thing here. And that will keep my running total. And the next thing I can do is while I'm here, I can also work out the lowest sales figure because I'm entering all the values in every time. So if I did this piece of code here and said, if the thing that's just been entered into my array, if that is less than the minimum value that I've got up here, then what we're going to do? Then I'm going to set the minimum value to equal or be assigned my array at the position of I. So the thing in my array is now going to overwrite whatever's stored in minimum. So if this thing is the minimum value, put that thing in my array inside the minimum value variable. And that means as I go through, it will work out the minimum value. And I'll end my if there. Okay? Now this is going to cause us a problem. So think about the logic of this. My array, so it'll say, the first time through this, it'll say if 45 is less than whatever's stored in minimum. Now if you look at it, minimum, when you declare this as a float, its default value is going to be 0. Okay, so it's saying, is 45 less than 0? Well, it's not, is it? Is 55 less than 0? No. Is 65 less than 0? No. Is 10 less than 0? Nope. Is 60? No. So there's a problem here. And the easiest way to fix this problem is to initialize it when we declare it. So I'm going to change this variable up here and say set the minimum variable, declare the float, and give it a stupidly high number. And that means, first time round, this 45, it's going to say if 45 is less than 99999. Well, it is, isn't it? So 45 is going to overwrite 99999, and it's going to be set in there. Happy days. Now what I'll do is I'll just continue my pseudocode over here, because now what I've done is I've managed to add into the array. I've managed to work out the total. I've managed to work out the minimum value. So I've done that one, done the inputs there. I've done the sales figures for each member of staff. I've not quite worked out the mean, but I can do that now. So let's do it here. So the mean is the total amount that I've added up all the totals divided by the number of sales staff. There we go. So that's that one. The values of the sales staff which are below the mean. Well, now I know the mean, I can basically replicate the same code. I can say for I equals 0 to num staff minus 1. So loop again 5 times. And then I'm going to check if the value is below the mean. So I can say if the value in my array at the position of I, which is this, if that is less than the mean that I've just calculated, then we need to output the value below mean, comma, my array I. And that will say value below the mean, and it'll say 45. Value below the mean, 10. Now the next thing to do, once it does that, is say how many sales figures are actually below the mean. So every time we find one of these values that's below the mean, we need to add it in to the below mean value. So I need to keep a running total. So I'm going to use this variable below mean. And I'm going to say below mean plus 1. So every time we find a value, add 1 to that variable. Once I've done that, make sure I close up everything, end my if, increment my loop, and then I just need outputs now. So all I would do is I would say output mean is, comma mean. I'm going to run out of space, so I'm just going to shift this up. And then I've got, so that's my mean. My values below the mean have already been outputted up here. Total number of values below the mean, so I need to output total below mean, comma, below mean, and finally the lowest sales figure. And that's min. There we are. So I think now, just going to check these off. So I've done that one. How many sales figures below the mean? Yeah, low sales figure. So what I've done here is I've got my variables. Let me just change the color of my pen while I explain this. So here are all my variable declarations and initializations. So this one's been initialized. I've gone for an array. So here's my my array declaration down here. Once I've worked out the number of staff, I loop through my array here and add up all the input them firstly, add up the totals and work out which one is the lowest value. Then I've worked out the mean. Then I do exactly the same code again that I used before to loop through my array. And this time I use it to loop through my array again, but checking the values against the newly learned or newly calculated mean. I output values below the mean. I increment the values below the mean every time. And then I've got my outputs down here. So 4 outputs in total. 1, 2, 3, and 4. My inputs are all here. 1 input there. And the second input is here. And that's it. That would get us all of 6 marks. So take your time when you're going through this. There's a lot to take in there. And with pseudocode, it's all about practice and decomposition of the problem. Break it down. There are multiple ways of doing this. So if you've got a different way, Don't worry about it. As long as the logic makes sense, you will achieve 6 marks. And I'll see you on the next question.